For centuries, pirate treasure has captured our imagination in powerful ways. The X marks the spot. The buried chests overflowing with gold and jewels and precious stones. Stories of legendary hoards hidden on secret islands, protected by riddles and curses, waiting for the right map and the right pirate to discover them. Blackbeard's gold supposedly buried somewhere off the coast of North Carolina, lost to the ages. Captain Kidd's fortune hidden before his execution, never to be found or recovered. These tales have inspired countless treasure hunts, adventure novels, blockbuster movies, and television specials. But the reality of pirate treasure is far different from what we think we know. Most treasure myths are not just exaggerated or embellished. They are completely fabricated from whole cloth, invented for entertainment and profit. And understanding why these myths exist reveals something darker about both history and human nature, about how we prefer legend to truth. The buried treasure map is probably the most iconic image associated with pirates. That creased, ancient parchment with an X marking the spot, perhaps with a skull and crossbones nearby for extra drama. Maybe some cryptic symbols or mysterious directions written in code. A real pirate would look at this and laugh. But here is the inconvenient truth. Real pirate treasure maps almost never existed. Think about it logically. If you are a pirate who has just buried treasure on some remote island, why would you create a map? If you know where it is, you do not need one. If you have trusted crew members, you can tell them the location directly, and if you bury it so deep that you forget, a map is not going to help much anyway. Someone else would find it first. Pirates were not cartographers sitting in tents, carefully plotting out their stashes with artistic flair and precision and detail. They were sailors, thieves, and criminals with immediate needs and shorter time horizons. They wanted money now, not centuries later. Most pirate plunder was either spent quickly on supplies, food, rum, and entertainment in port towns, invested in ships and crew to expand operations, or hidden in safe locations known only to the crew members. The few instances where pirates did hide valuables, they simply memorized the location or shared it verbally with trusted crew members using landmarks and reference points. Written records were extraordinarily dangerous. They could fall into the hands of authorities and lead to arrest and execution. A map was incriminating evidence that would guarantee a noose, not a treasure guide worth keeping around. This fundamental truth undermines the entire treasure map mythology that we know so well. The myth of buried pirate treasure became popular during the Romantic era of the 19th century, when people began viewing pirates with nostalgia rather than fear. The real pirates of the Golden Age were brutal, ugly, and utterly lacking in romance. But authors and storytellers chose to romanticize the so-called Golden Age of Piracy, turning real historical figures into legendary adventurers and noble rebels fighting against tyranny. Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, published in 1881, popularized the entire concept of pirate treasure maps and adventure on the high seas. The novel was fiction, genuinely brilliant fiction, but fiction nonetheless. The story was so compelling, so vivid, that readers were transported. Yet generations of readers grew up believing that pirates actually operated this way, that they created maps and buried fortunes and sailed under codes of honor. Treasure hunters have spent enormous amounts of money, time, and effort searching for imaginary treasure based on myths created by Victorian authors who never went near a pirate ship in their lives. Entire industries grew around these fantasies. Metal detecting clubs formed throughout the Caribbean and Atlantic coasts. XP editions launched with expensive equipment and teams of hopeful adventurers. TV shows dedicated entire seasons to finding treasure, all because a novel was so well written that people forgot it was not real. The line between fiction and historical fact blurred completely together, and it has never really recovered. Blackbeard, whose real name was Edward Teach, has a particular treasure myth attached to his name that rivals any fictional tale. According to legend, the famous pirate buried millions in gold and jewels somewhere along the coast of North Carolina, where he operated his fearsome ships and terrorized merchant vessels for years. Supposedly, there is a fortune waiting to be discovered, hidden in a location known only to Teach himself, lost forever when he was killed in a battle with naval forces. This myth persists because Blackbeard was genuinely genuinely wealthy and feared. He commanded respect and terror simultaneously. But wealth and buried treasure are fundamentally not the same thing. Blackbeard purchased actual property, including a substantial house in Bath, North Carolina, where he lived with legitimacy and comfort. He invested heavily in his crew and fleet, acquiring ships and ammunition and supplies. He held treasure in accessible locations that could be quickly liquidated or moved. He did not retreat to a beach with a spade and bury a chest like some storybook pirate. The myth of Blackbeard's gold likely arose because people assumed that someone so successful and so feared must have left behind a legendary fortune. But successful pirates were successful precisely because they kept their wealth liquid and mobile and accessible, not buried in the ground where it would be vulnerable to theft, discovery, or the destructive elements. Captain William Kidd presents another fascinating case where reality and myth diverge so wildly that separating them becomes nearly impossible. Kidd was a privateer, a ship captain operating with government sanction to attack enemy vessels, who descended into piracy later in his career. He was eventually captured, brought to trial, and executed in 1701 in London. Before his execution, facing certain death, he made vague statements about treasure he had hidden in various locations, either to bargain for his life or simply to confuse the authorities interrogating him. The extent of his actual buried treasure remains unclear even today, though some fragments and pieces have been discovered in scattered locations over the centuries. But the myth of Captain Kidd's fabulous fortune grew exponentially after his death, spreading through taverns and becoming legend. Treasure hunters have searched for decades, even centuries, based on cryptic clues that might not even be real or authentic. People have spent enormous sums of money looking for Kidd's treasure, creating elaborate maps and theories and conducting expeditions, all based on legends that might have originated as nothing more than desperate lies from a condemned man trying to save his own life. Walking the plank is perhaps the most enduring pirate myth of all time. The image of a blindfolded prisoner forced to walk along a wooden board suspended over the dark ocean, falling to their death in the deep waters below, is instantly recognizable and absolutely iconic. The condemned prisoner takes one last step into nothingness. It is also almost certainly not real. There is virtually no historical evidence that pirates actually made prisoners walk the plank as a method of execution. It is far too theatrical, far too impractical, and far too unreliable as an execution method compared to simpler alternatives. Pirates did execute people, sometimes brutally, when discipline was required or examples needed to be made, but they used methods that actually worked with certainty: shooting, stabbing, hanging, poisoning. These were straightforward and certain and required no special preparation or equipment. Walking the plank appears to be a purely fictional invention, likely created for dramatic effect in adventure stories and novels. The earliest documented reference to the practice appears in fiction written purely for entertainment, not in historical records or court documents. Yet the myth persists so strongly in popular culture that many people genuinely believe it was a common pirate practice. The notion that pirates were united by a strict code of honor and followed specific pirate laws is another myth worth examining closely. Popular culture loves the idea of the pirate code, a sort of honor among thieves system that supposedly governed all pirate behavior. To some extent, pirate crews did establish rules and systems of governance for practical purposes. Many ships had articles that crew members signed, outlining exactly how plunder would be distributed and how disputes would be settled. This was practical necessity more than noble tradition or honor. But the idea of universal pirate laws enforced across all crews operating across the Atlantic is pure fantasy. Different pirate groups operated completely differently based on their circumstances and leaders. Some were relatively democratic, with captains elected and removable. Others were ruled by iron-fisted, autocratic captains who made all decisions unilaterally. Some distributed treasure equally among all crew members. Others kept the lion's share for leadership and key personnel. There was no pirate confederation, no agreed-upon code spanning the entire Atlantic or Indian Ocean. These myths were invented later, during the Romantic era, to impose order and coherence on what was actually chaotic, brutal, and utterly disorganized criminality. If you made it this far into understanding pirate treasure myths and their origins, consider hitting that subscribe button and leaving a like to help support this channel and its content. Tell me in the comments down below which pirate treasure myth fooled you the longest, or which one you still want to believe in despite the evidence. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.